900 CHML, you're watching on Cable 14. Theo Salas is with us, president of Integrity Works. The website, by the way, Integrity Works, that's WKS.ca. IntegrityWKS.ca. And great website, by the way. There's some information on there. And, of course, he's also the author of Selfishness Matters, a book by Theo Salas. Let me, we're kind of limited here because we're going to do the contest a little bit later on, so we only have a little bit of time. But we're going to have you back, and we're going to do phones because I get a lot of response every time you come on here saying, Perfect. Hey, what about this? What about this? I said, don't ask me, ask Theo.
Right.
Workplace. We've talked about relationships at home. The reality is we spend a good deal of our time in the workplace, whether it's at a factory, whether it's at an office, whether it doesn't much matter what it is, into relationships with other people. You don't choose your coworkers a lot of the time. You're stuck with them. Oftentimes you can have some wonderful relationships. Sometimes you're stuck with a bunch of slugs, and there can be some real problems.
Right.
Don't rock the boat, Theo. Don't complain, Theo. You know, don't be the guy who's always going to the boss, Theo, because you know what the rest of the staff are going to think.
Right.
How do you develop those relationships, and more importantly, how do you deal with some of the problems? I know that one of the instances you talked about in the book dealt with people that, liars in the workplace. Which can be a problem. I'm not suggesting it's rampant, but it does happen. How do you approach something like that without basically ostracizing yourself from everyone else?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it is rampant. I wrote an article called "Liars in the Workplace" or "How to Deal with Liars in the Workplace," and I published it. It's on my website, but I also published it at the social media information sharing place called Hub Pages. And I published a lot of different articles on that. Of all the articles that I wrote, I had thousands and thousands of hits on that, and any number of comments from people calling or writing in, talking about their experience of dealing with liars and how horrible it was at work. It was like the biggest response that I had for any article that I'd ever written. So there's a lot of that going on at work. Yeah,
you opened a wound.
It's something that people are really dealing with a lot, and I think it comes from, my belief about that is it comes from a lack of values in the workplace. So Integrity Works, my business, is really based on this idea that integrity is critical, both in your personal life and in your professional life. And so when organizations say that they have values, because most organizations will have a website and they'll have a bunch of values on their website, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The sad thing about that...
Sometimes it's posted on the wall.
Yes, and no one knows what they are. If I ask employees who are struggling with people who are lying to them, like lying to them about their work or spreading rumors or taking credit for their work or just somehow manipulating them, I'll say, okay, but tell me a little bit about what the values that your organization, what are the values that your organization stands for? Because I know you have corporate values, and they draw a blank. And I say, well, what's your mission? What's your vision? No one knows, right? And I think that because there's a vacuum, a leadership vacuum, where the values that the organization says that they have isn't actually being lived, and there's no impetus for employees to actually rally around those values. Without that leadership, you're going to end up with all these problems because people are just going to get involved in power plays. They're going to, try to find ways to kind of strategize and to make themselves feel better or look better. You really need leadership that says, these are our values and this is how we're going to live them. So we can't have these lies going on in the workplace because we value honesty or we value accountability.
Yeah, but there are people that can skirt those issues so cleverly,
right,
and will crawl all over somebody to try to get ahead themselves in the workplace, taking credit for somebody else's work.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
Sure, and the supervisor probably can't track that. So if you're the victim of that, what do you do? Do you challenge them? Do you go to the boss and say, hey, wait a second here?
Yeah, so the other issue that oftentimes happens is that most organizations either have a conflict resolution policy that no one knows about, or they absolutely don't. And so each individual employee is left with trying to figure this out on their own, which of course is disastrous because lots of us don't feel comfortable dealing with conflict. We don't know how to approach a colleague who is putting us down or is manipulating us. And sometimes it's not safe for us to do that because
the most drastic example, because it's a true story, was Frank Serpico, who was a detective in the New York Police Department.
Right.
The Al Pacino movie that was made back in the 70s. It's a true story.
Right.
A guy who goes into a department, and we knew that there was corruption in the NYPD at the time. He goes in there, and he's faced with it.
Right.
Just shut up, do what we do, and here's your envelope.
Right.
He had ethics, he had standards, he blew the whistle. He almost lost his life as a result. Now, that's an extreme example, but I mean, variations on that theme can happen anywhere.
Yeah, and it oftentimes happens. And again, I say it's because there's just been lip service to this concept of integrity at work. There's just lip service placed to values. Organizations go through strategic planning weekends or days, right? And then they talk amongst themselves as to what their key values are going to be. And then they come up with really good sounding ones. But those values really are just used as kind of marketing tools. They put on a website so that people who come across this company will go, oh, we want to do business with these people because they really value accountability and trust and accountability and innovation and creativity. But there's no impetus within that organization. There's no leadership that says, okay, now how do we go about making sure that everyone follows these values? Like, how do we go about making sure that these values can come to life in our organization?
Why not?
I think because we minimize the importance of what is called, quote unquote, soft skills. I think we think the job is just about producing something or selling something. I think we don't get the significance of making sure that the people that we have who are performing these tasks actually are working in a way that allows them to maximize their absolute potential. And it's frustrating because there's been great books written about this, and I'm going to recommend a book, and it's called Liberating the Corporate Soul.
You're the only author that's ever come on here to recommend other people's books.
Because, it's all about sharing information, right? So, Liberating the Corporate Soul, and it's by this guy called Richard Barrett, and he wrote it in the late 90s, and he clearly shows, and there's all these case studies that says, if an organization really dedicates itself to living values and enforcing values, massive increases in productivity and creativity. I mean, there's no doubt by now that there's tons of evidence that says that if you have an organization that really dedicates itself to live in integrity and making sure that you have the right people who act the right way, it's a huge benefit to your bottom line. But we oftentimes cut those corners. So in times like this, tough economic times, the first thing that seems to go is money spent on training, staff development, right? Because it's seen as kind of like an add-on. But at the same time, we have this mythology that says, oh yeah, people are our strength. Right? Well, if people are your strength, you've got to invest in them to make sure that they have the skills to be able to work properly with each other, that they know how to communicate with each other, that they know how to deal with situations effectively, that they can be accountable, and they know what accountability really means and what that looks like in the workplace.
Let me do the break. I want to come back in a couple of seconds and spend some more time with Theo Sellis. This is the Bill Kelly Show. You're on 900 CHML. You're watching on Cable 14.